North Idaho College proudly presents NIC Today, an informational news magazine that highlights the people, programs, and campus life at North Idaho College and the surrounding community. And now, your host and moderator, President of North Idaho College, Dr. Joe Dunlap.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to North Idaho College Today, the program that gives you perspectives and insights into the people and programs that make this place work. Today we have some special folks with us. We've got Bill McElver, who is plant manager for North Idaho College, as well as Rhonda Smalley, and the two of them helped restore the Powder magazine, which is part of the old Fort Sherman. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then today we also have with us former faculty member Fran Bahr, who taught English at North Idaho College and also recently wrote this book called The Gathering Place that highlights the history of North Idaho College. In addition, we're going to talk to Bob Murray, the former dean who recently retired from North Idaho College after 42 years of service. So welcome, everyone. We're glad to have you here today. And as always, I've got Mark Browning here, our Vice President for Community and Governmental Affairs and Marketing. So Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Well, let's start off talking about the Powder magazine and the process that took to restore. It's probably the oldest brick building in North Idaho. And Bill, why don't you start off and tell us a little bit about that?
All right, Joey, thank you for the opportunity to do that. Yeah, I think it started with a vision from our director, Mike Halpern, facilities director, several years back. He's had many years to drive by that building and envision what it could be. And he had envisioned it as a place that students could study, a place that possibly committees could get together to have meetings and public visitations, and mostly as a place to showcase the history of North Idaho College, the fort, and the Coeur d'Alene tribe, and to some extent the logging that took place on campus here. So as you know, Mike will be leaving us soon. He's also retiring, and I think he wouldn't have been probably happy had he gotten out of here without the opportunity to restore that. So he saw an opportunity here about a year and a half ago, so he went to Vice President of Resource Management, Ron Dorn, and presented the concept. And I joke with both of them because I happened to be in the meeting when that was mentioned, and I think Ron wasn't quite sure what he was getting into, but he agreed that, being a historian himself, that this had some merit. So he decided that he would say, yeah, that might be a good idea. And I think that's all it took for Mike. Mike brought the battering ram and knocked the hinges off the doors, and literally that was the first thing we did, was took the door off the building. And we've been in the process of restoring it ever since. And fortunate for us here at college, along with Rhonda here, who did a lot of the historical research and worked with a lot of local talent, if you will, to research the artifacts and displays that are on the walls in the building now. She did a lot of that work, and I think a great job of it. Thank you, Rhonda. And along with that, we have a lot of talented folks, our technicians here at the college, and our facilities and maintenance and landscape crews were all involved in the restoration. And we spent about a year and a half restoring it, and well, I imagine we'll get into maybe some of that here in a bit, but in a nutshell, we were able to restore it. And last Wednesday, we had the privilege of being a part of presenting it as part of the 80th anniversary of the college. And I'm not a superstitious person, but I couldn't help but start scratching my head a little bit when that rainbow blew up over the top of it about 5 minutes after we dedicated it. I thought that was pretty spectacular. So that's how it kind of come about, Joe.
Yeah, that was a great dedication. And in addition to dedicating the Powder magazine, that evening we also dedicated Chiemquet Park, which means headwaters, which is the park behind the Student Union building. And we dedicated the Veterans Memorial that is next to the Powder magazine as well. It was just a spectacular event. Now, Rhonda, when I first got to this college, you had made copies of the original map of Fort Sherman, and you produced one of those for me, and I have it framed and it's hanging in my office, and that's a very lovely artifact. So talk a little bit about your interest in the Powder magazine and what you've done to help preserve the history of Fort Sherman and North Idaho College.
Thank you. It was really a privilege to be asked to be a part of it. Mike and I have worked together for 20 plus years, and he knew my skill set, and he entrusted me with the vision that he had for displaying our history. So I was able to work alongside of him, and we, like we had talked about earlier, we used influences from Fran in her book. The tribe, we worked closely with members of the tribe, as well as the Museum of, the Museum of North Idaho. They were awesome, and everybody came together because it really is a vital part of the college that's never been used before. It's going to be a great asset. That's lovely. So we were able to work together and display it very clearly, I think. We had to condense all that information down to a palatable on panels.
It's challenging, isn't it? Because
It
there's
is.
so much history there, and there's so much relevant information
Thank
that
you.
it's hard to boil that down to just put into displays. And you see Mike talking there about the process and some of the groups now on campus that are utilizing that. But the work that you've done to be able to research that and to be time appropriate, I would imagine was a bit of a challenge to be able to just verify that information, because as you mentioned
Absolutely.
at the dedication, you're writing history in the sense that when you replicate it, this is the version that will go forward. So how
Absolutely.
challenging was it to be able to verify that?
It was, we really strove to use two sources, two reliable sources, if not three. We tried to gather as much information before we put it down on a piece of paper. And if we couldn't verify it to any degree, it wasn't used.
Right.
And then also we resourced people like Robert Singletary and Dorothy Dahlgren, and the information about the tribe. We used Quanah, Matheson, and it was wonderful having that collaborative effort. And then Fran has this wonderful book that just laid it all out for us. So we used her book, in a sense, as our stepping stones to get the project done.
Bill, there's quite a few artifacts that are inside the Powder magazine. Can you describe some of those?
Yeah, I can. Actually, some outside are original. There's original marker. Maybe Rhonda can help me with that. Was it the longitude, latitude marker, or a U.S. longitude? And that sits outside of the building. There's a bell out back that has made its way around Coeur d'Alene and finally here, and that's part of it. Some of the items on the walls, as far as the guns, are replicas, so they're not actual original artifacts, but look good enough that they serve the purpose. And outside the cannon is also a replica, but all time period sensitive, and quite a process in getting some of those located, especially the cannon. We had to go back east to have the actual carriage for it built and shipped out, and we got creative on how to get that done. So, yeah, a lot of neat things to see in there.
And in the restoration of that, there was a lot of work with the Coeur d'Alene tribe. And I know that, Rhonda, you worked and put together these placards that represented history and photographs. And can you describe those a little bit? I mean, those are beautiful.
Certainly, we tried to get together a story, a concise story from before when they were here on the land to today. And so Mike and I came up with the storyline. We wrote into that storyline, gathered photographs from the Museum of North Idaho and other sources. And then we took those panels that were designed and ready to go and sent them to Heather, Keene, and Quanah to say, is this the true and accurate account of the way that you see it? And in every case, they came back better. It was the true story. It was the real story, written in their words, the way that it was as it was back then. So that was a real pleasure. It has been such a wonderful experience for me to learn more about this.
Well, that's wonderful. Now, Fran, you wrote The Gathering Place, which is a history of North Idaho College. and you were an English professor here at the college. So talk to us a little bit about how this project came about, what you did to bring it together, and what you learned during that process.
Oh boy. Well, it took 8 years to move from the beginning when Trustee Sheila Wood and Steve Shank, who was the Vice President of College Relations, they started talking and thought, my gosh, that's a great idea. Let's preserve the history of the college. And so they went to Bill Nixon, who was then the chair of the Board of Trustees, and he thought it was a fabulous idea. So that began in 1999. And then what the college did is asked Bob Singletary, who I know many of you are familiar with, to work on it. And he did for, I think maybe a couple of years. And then I was asked by Rolly Williams and Sheila to continue working on it. And so that's when I got into the mix. But you had a question?
No, go. You're fine. Keep going.
Okay. So the thing I think I have to say about this whole process is that it was truly a group project. I'm kind of embarrassed that my name is on the book when so many other people really worked hard on it. And of course, Bob was one. He drafted most of the first 6 chapters in kind of a rough outline. He did the research, which was fabulous because he's a historian and he knows what he's doing. So that was very helpful. And then when I got on board, we put together a committee of people who were the most loyal, faithful advocates through the whole process. And I just want to mention their names quickly. There was Mary Sorensen, who was a retired librarian, Betty McLean, who was business instructor and the Dean of Women and was at the college for many, many years. George Ives, who was a fellow English instructor. Denise Clark, who was also a librarian. Donna Ward, who was the executive secretary for the president. Erna Reinhardt. And what's really interesting is that almost all of those people have retired or moved on, but they stuck with me through the whole process. Maybe the biggest, most important chunk of work that was done besides the writing was done by Sarah Flaidland. And she pulled together all the photographs. And I'm sure she didn't really realize what she was getting into when she said, okay, I'll do that. But she did it. She just did a fabulous job. And I'm not sure I could have done that. So I want to thank her so much for doing that. She's now the grants writer coordinator
That's right.
at the college.
Yeah.
Yep. And I wanted to mention before I begin talking about my own process, Rolly Williams. He had a vision for this book that in every 10 years maybe it would be updated.
That was going to be
So,
my question.
yeah.
It's written for the 75th, but when will the updates come? Yes.
Well, that's up to the Board of Trustees and Joe and other folks involved like that. But I think it would be wonderful to keep that vision in place because we forget so much.
Right.
And if every 10 years there were a revision, a supplement, something like that, it'd be awesome.
One of the things that really struck me in the book, Fran, as someone who's only lived in the Coeur d'Alene area a couple of years now, is just the breadth of history, and not only of the area, but of the college. But the common thread that runs throughout with the people are the students, and the different activities and the different interests of the students that run beyond. And that gets me into our next segment here on the program, which is one of the more common activities that we see on campus now is something called parkour. And if you're not sure what that is, stay tuned. Josh Blakely will give us a look. Stay tuned.
Okay, so we're going to swap Bill out.
don't know if your knees hurt like mine do just watching that, but that is Parkour, produced by Josh Blakely, a student in our graphic arts program at Workforce Training. So, Joe, I expect that maybe that'll be the next activity for our trustees at the Board of Trustees meeting. We'll run them through a little parkour course.
Well, it's either that, or I was wondering if maybe Bob Murray was doing that in his retirement here. And Bob Murray was Dean of General Studies here at North Idaho College and just retired a short while ago. He's been with us for 42 years. So Bob, talk to us a little bit about your time here, some of the history and what you've seen change between when you started and when you retired.
Thank you, Joe. Been a lot of change, but I remember my first day when I came for an interview. The president interviewed all faculty at that time. Wow. And so we arrived early, and I was visiting with Pauline Irvine, the admin assistant, while Barry was getting ready for my wife and I to come in. And there were these boxes beside her desk, and she says, "Oh, we had new admission forms created, and they've got to be destroyed." And I'm going like, "They have to be destroyed?" She says, "Yes, we were trying to save space on the forms, and when they came back from the printer, we noticed it said, 'Are you going to be a part-time stud or a full-time stud?' And the president said he would not allow that kind of thing to go out to the community." So I think we've become a little bit more liberal in how we manage things here on campus. We've always been a great family, and my last year here, people have heard me say many times, we know how to be a community college, but what we're still learning is how to be a college community. And it's the college community that makes the 42 years go really fast and have a lot of fun and a lot of great memories. When I did come, everybody went by Mr. or Mrs., no first names. I was called down to the business office my first week, and the business manager said, "These would be the people that would be good to avoid here on campus because they'll give you a bad name." I don't think those kinds of things happen anymore.
Well, I think you're right, Mr. Murray, but when you came to the college, I believe your specialty was in botany.
Botany, yes.
And so you and I had a conversation one time walking across campus, and you were talking about the diversity of fungi here in North Idaho, and it being one of the most diverse places on the planet for that sort of thing. I found that fascinating.
Yes, we have over 6,000 identified specimens here in North Idaho, and people do come from all over the world to collect here in the fall. And Kit Skates, who used to be an instructor here in PE department, was an expert, and she always took these people out, including me. I had never seen such diversity of mushrooms, from bright purple to red to great big to little tiny. She knew everyone, and we had a lot of fun field trips with her.
42 years. I mean, that's more than half the history of the school.
You didn't have to say it that way.
I think it's tremendous because, people change careers 5 to 6 times now in their professional life.
I've got 4 more to go.
You've got 4 more to go now. You better get after it. I'm curious, is there a seminal moment that stands out during your history here?
Oh my goodness, there are lots of them. Probably the 2 people I'll remember the most is Miss Nisho Tukey, who was the registrar, and Florence Stranahan, who taught home ec. They worked behind the scenes for students more than anybody here on campus, and most people didn't know about it. Tukey knew every student by ID number, GPA, name, the whole thing. And she quite often said when computers came to campus, she would quit, because we didn't need computers. Florence worked behind the scenes to make sure that students had a good experience here. I always know at Christmas time there are always students who get left behind, they can't go home. Right. And so she always had them to her home for Christmas Eve, and she would invite faculty to come. And the requirement was, as a faculty member, you were supposed to bring a Christmas gift for one of these students. And after dinner, she would always say, "Well, let's go to the Christmas tree because I think Santa Claus has come." Well, the students would always sort of hold back, kind of thing, and she always made sure she'd give one of her family members a gift first, and then she'd read the student's name. And so there would be a gift from Santa Claus under the tree. So it was just a great experience, and she always lamented our first week here. She says, you know, we hired 7 new faculty that year in 1971. She said, there's too many faculty. You can't come to my house on Friday anymore for potluck and bridge. And that was my greeting to campus. You've made the faculty too big.
You put it over the top.
Yep.
Over the top. Too many. Oh my.
And we did come for 4 years was all. My wife taught 7th grade here in Coeur d'Alene for 20 years. And 4 years was going to be what we came for. And somehow it stretched on to 40.
Well, that's great, Bob. Let me jump back to Fran for just a minute and ask her about the process for writing the book in terms of what you went through and how you put it together.
Okay. Well, I taught full time while the book was being written, so it was a slow process and sometimes laborious, but I had a friend in Sheila Woods. She was like a bulldog. I mean, she just called me every day and emailed me and so on. As far as the book, one of the first things I knew I wanted to do was to make it about people and not about cold, dry, hard facts. Now, that didn't mean that I didn't want to talk about buildings and administrators and so on and so forth, but I wanted it to be about people because that's why we're here. That's the whole point. The other thing I knew right off is that I wanted to pay respect to the legacy of the Coeur d'Alene Indians because this was their summer camp.
Right.
And I was reminded when I talked to some of those folks that for generations people had been coming to this camp, and that's where they got together, all the bands, and they celebrated and talked and played games and learned from one another. And it was kind of a gathering of everyone. And that's where the title, The Gathering Place, came from, was that original coming together of peoples. And then when George Ives told me that I had to have a thesis statement, that's what I thought of doing. And so that's how we focused the book. As far as research, I had a lot to work with, a lot of work other people had done. David Osterberg was at one time the college historian for a short time, but he did gather a lot of information. Judith Silty did the Living History Project, and there were oral interviews. We used the library, special collections, the museum, many.
A lot of sources.
Yeah, personal interviews, you name it.
Well, listen, we could have done an entire program with each one of you, and we've run out of time. So I want to thank Bill and Rhonda and Fran and Bob and, of course, Mark for being here today. That's the end.